Hi everybody, it's Michelle and I'm back down at McDougall Cottage, and today we're going to be making another Scottish favorite. We are going to be making scones. Now I hope you caught our video the other day when we made shortbreads. And in the same vein, today we're going to be making a very basic scone recipe to which you can add your favorite ingredients. You can make them sweet by adding chocolate chips or fruit, or you can make them savory by adding a little bit of garlic, chili, and some cheese. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our basic scone recipe. So I've preheated the oven to 450 degrees and I've gathered together all of the ingredients we're going to need for our basic scone recipe. So we have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, a pinch of salt, those are our dry ingredients, and then for our wet ingredients we've got 1 egg lightly beaten, 5 ounces of light cream, you could use milk if you wanted to, and then we've got 3 generous tablespoonfuls of butter. So we're going to start our basic scones by taking the dry ingredients and sifting them together. So I'm adding the flour and the baking powder and the salt. Now if you have a sifter at home, that's handy. If you don't, that's not a problem. What you can do is just use a sieve and tap it like this and they'll sift together nicely. Once I've got the dry ingredients all sifted together, I'm going to incorporate the butter, and just like I did with the shortbread, if you saw that video, I'm just going to put it in and then I'm going to use my hands to work it in so that it's nice and evenly distributed, and then I'm going to form a well in my dough and add the wet ingredients, the egg and the cream, just like that. And then as before, I'm just going to start to incorporate it with my hands. Like I said before, I'm using my hands. They've been well washed, they're nice and clean. If you want to do it this way, that's great. If you prefer to do it in a food processor, you can go ahead and do that. Just pulse it a few times until it starts to come together. Okay? So I've sifted all my dry ingredients together, and then I've incorporated the butter by massaging it in with my hands. I've made a little bit of a well, and now I'm going to put in my wet ingredients. So I've got 5 ounces of cream and 1 lightly beaten egg. So I add those to the well, and then just to start off, I'm going to use a fork to start to mix things together. And once it starts to come together nicely, I'm going to get in there with my hands and really give it a good mix. Once it's all come together as a dough, we're going to turn it out onto a floured surface, and we are going to roll it out, and then we're going to start to make our delicious scones. So you can see the dough's come together really nicely, and I've turned it out onto a floured surface, and I've put a little bit of flour on my rolling pin. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to roll it out to about 1/2 inch thickness. Now you have a couple of options for making scones. You can roll them out and cut them like I'm doing, or what you can do is just take this entire ball of dough, roll it out to about 1/2 inch thickness. You can score it into as many pieces as you want, usually 6 or 8 with a fork, and bake it all together as one. But I'm going to do the more traditional way of making individual scones. So it's about 1/2 inch thickness there. And now I'm going to use a slightly bigger cutter that I used to make the shortbreads, and I'm going to go ahead and start cutting out my scones. I'm just going to cutting out my scones, and I'm going to put them, oh, our timer's going off. There we go. And I'm just going to place them on the parchment lined baking sheet. I'm not going to put them too close together because the scones are going to puff up as they bake. So we don't want them growing together. There we go. And now I'm just going to gather up the rest of this, form it into a ball, roll it out, and use it to cut a few more scones. So now we've got all of our scones cut out and on our tray. Before we pop them into the oven, we're just going to give them a light brushing. You can do this with either egg wash, or you can do it with a little bit of milk. So we'll just give them each a quick little brush before we pop them into the oven. Okay, so we have our pan of homemade scones here. We've given them a little bit of brush with some milk, and now we're going to pop them into an oven that was preheated to 450 degrees. Now the scones cook fairly quickly. They're only going to be in here for about 12 minutes. We just want them lightly browned So again, you want to keep an eye on them as they're baking, and we'll see what comes out in a few minutes. So our scones are ready. They've been baking for 12 minutes at 450 degrees, and oh my goodness, they look absolutely perfect. Look at that gorgeous light brown color, and they've puffed up so nicely. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to pop them onto a cooling rack. So our delicious scones are ready for eating. The cottage smells amazing. I so wish you had smell-o-vision. Anyway, look at these delicious scones. They turned out perfectly. The recipe makes between 8 and 12 depending on how big you make them, but they turned out perfectly, and don't be jealous, but I'm going to enjoy one right now.